hi everyone. We finally made it. I'm sorry if I can't see your comments, but that's the way it is at the moment for some of these things. I'm just not sure why. But anyway, we're here to talk about Close Encounters of the Fifth Kind tonight. And I'm here with Dr. Gemma Regan in her Millennium Falcon right behind her.
Yes, I've travelled at Mach 11 to get here just so I can see you.
Great. So now almost everyone today has read about the fantastic accounts of UFOs. Obviously, they haven't. They've been hiding under a mushroom somewhere. And these UFOs, they hover silently, they rise up vertically, they disappear from view at fantastic speeds, they enter our oceans, and some people see them just heading straight into outer space. So, but it's one thing for witnesses to report seeing UFOs go across the sky, but it's another for witnesses to claim that they signal to these UFOs and the UFOs somehow signal back. So many people around the world claim to be able to call in UFOs and by inference their occupants by making telepathic contact with them. But is this actually possible? Are these real events psychic phenomena or just wishful thinking? So that's what we're talking about tonight, Gem and I, plus Dr. Stephen Greer's CE-5 protocols for calling in UFOs. Why do they appear to work for some people and not others, which I have found? I think you might have too, Jen. And do we really need them, given that there's been decades and decades of reports by people who've never used CE-5 protocols, they've just seen them seemingly out of the blue, or for different people on multiple occasions. So, Jen, why don't you get us started with you telling us a bit about your interest in UFOs and share your experiences of what happened when you've used CE-5 protocols in your Skywatchers.
Okay, well, I've been doing CE-5 since 2013, but I've also had lots of experiences long before that. Some people have heard that I had an abduction type experience where I woke up and had aliens come into a room and take me away. And there was a time lapse, so I have no memory of what happened once they took me away and I came back. I did do a regression. I've had suspicions that I've had UFO ET contact throughout my life. I had an experience a few years ago where I was healed by alien contact.
That was pretty amazing.
Yes, which I've talked about on another stream. But if you ask for help and say, look, I've had all this contact, do it, they actually came and healed me. So, and I have all the evidence for that. And there's another, you've got another YouTube up on the thing that people can watch all about that. But so I've always had a fascination, everything paranormal, etc. I think it's all under the same umbrella, as I think most people have suspicions of. Now it's all a matter of consciousness. Are you aware of what's around you? Can you see into different dimensions? How are your perceptions tuned? Because I think it's definitely about a screen that you can put up. If you can open that filter and you can perceive so many different things. And I think that CE-5 is just another way of removing that filter, or at least honing that filter into a little place. And so 2013, I'll be very brief, I had a fantastic experience, my first time using the CE-5 app by Stephen Greer. Downloaded it, went up, I'd started doing my radio show then, so I thought, oh, I'll try this out. Went up with on top of Mount Glorious with the person who I was doing the radio show with at the time. Ditched him since then, but and had this is one of my alien beings. These are the superior beings on Earth, by the way. They're just coming to check up on us. But yes, and I had an amazing experience. Only 10 minutes in. What you do is you have to use the app, which is a really boring meditation. Stephen Greer bores you into a state of consciousness, an altered consciousness, by going on about the apple and all this ridiculous stuff. And yeah, there's programming for you. Bye, Apple. and using a laser, you point out with your position with the laser light, and go into this meditation, and I had this enormous fireball experience where I saw this fireball cross the sky. It was a full moon at the time, which is not the best. You're supposed to do it in new moon, and it was bigger than the moon, the full moon, and it shot across the sky, and it then stopped. It didn't just, it just stopped there, and it was there. And it was just an incredible experience. And then I had lots of lights and things that I saw after that. Now I have it all on audio. I was videoing at the time. I was also using a magnetometer, EMF reader, and the EMF went off the scale, which you can hear on the audio. So that was all fantastic. And then we were sitting discussing it, having a glass of wine after that. By the way, I hadn't had any beforehand. And the shape of a saucer literally went over the top of us. Remember, we were in full moonlight and it went straight over the top of us. It was an incredible experience. And when I was going home, I felt like I was being watched the whole time. A week later, I was being out. I wasn't using CE-5. I wasn't thinking about it at all. I'd been out at a concert. I came out and I saw the exact same thing, a big fireball across the sky, across the city this time. So there was no, I had already made contact, but I wasn't trying to, and it just went in the opposite direction. And then when I was going home that night, there was a green light that followed me the whole way. It's that bright green neon light followed me all the way until I got to Milton. And I definitely felt like there was some sort of contact. Since then, I've had contact. And as I say, I even called them in a year or two ago to ask for healing from a tall white. Now, I know I look a bit like a tall white at the moment, but I'm not usually. It's just the light in here. So it is possible to make contact. The question is, what are we doing? That's what I want to know. Is this mediated contact where we're manifesting something? And I've done a lot of experiments where we're doing about manifestation of UFOs. Did several different ones with different groups of people, a group of witches who were magically inclined, who'd never done anything, never saw UFOs, and we all managed to manifest at the time and the place that somebody else selected a light and to flash where we wanted it in the sky.
Can I just interrupt you, Gem? Someone's just said having difficulty hearing. I'm just wondering, can someone let me know, put a message on there that you're all hearing what's going on, please?
Especially the MI5.
MI5. Can everyone hear us? Someone please say something there.
Hang on, I think I can help. Let's use this. And you hear now, I will use my thought processes.
Ben says it's fine. That's good. Let's keep going.
It's working now. I knew it would. See?
Yeah.
This is the new modified.
Good. Daniel says he can hear us well. Thank you, Daniel. And Liz says good. That's great. And hello to Annalena and Deborah. And I know a couple of people who are having a problem. Sharon, hi Sharon, Jude, Gail, and Baza. And so hopefully. Great. Okay, we'll keep on going. Go, Gem. That's a wonderful photo. I'd love to take a photo of that for blackmail purposes.
I don't need blackmailing. I'll do anything.
So keep telling us about your experiences.
Yes. So you can manifest, and I question what it is that we're actually manifesting. CE-5 is considered to be human-initiated contact. So it's close encounters of the 5th kind. So we are consciously trying to connect with an intelligent life force that is considered to be extraterrestrial. Now, of course, that's not considered. How do we know they're extraterrestrial? There's so many things here that are perceived as demons and angels and whatever you want to label them. What is it that we're actually connecting? And of course, there's the other question, which I think, I don't know if I've asked you about this, but what about a thought form? You know, it's the creation of a thought form, the egregore. In magic, there is the creation. You can get a group of people together and you can have an initiated creation of a thought form. There's the known homunculus that you can use to go off and do evil deeds, or you can just have a common goal. And that's, of course, what CE-5 is. Don't laugh at me.
Laughing at your hat. Can you take your hat off? Because I've got to stop giggling.
This is the new
I've got to stop giggling.
This is Gem 5, okay? Gem 5. They won't be able to hear you. So that's what I think we have to question, first of all, what is it we're bringing in? What is it that we're contacting? And are we actually manifesting anything? I, for one, and I know you as well, do not trust Dr. Stephen Greer one little bit. He says that everything that we're connecting is benevolent. And if we send out positive thoughts, then we are not infiltrating the thought conscious forms. And so only positive things will come back.
Okay. Well, let's just put a pause on that for the moment. Now let's talk about the protocols, and the actual package of the protocols, the different things that people can use, what you've used, and how did you find that? Did you find that was useful?
Well, it's considered to be coherent thought sequencing. That's what he calls it, CTS. Mindful meditation, as I say, there's all sorts of different forms. It's a collective goal of just one person or many people thinking and focusing on inviting, hopefully, in benevolent aliens, UFOs, extraterrestrials, however you want to frame it, into our airspace. So they have to actually come into the Earth's airspace in a location where you are. So you use a laser, usually to point. Obviously, you've got to be careful because you're not on any flight paths. You point out your location, because, of course, they need to know where you are. Of course, they're not that sensible that they can identify us. You point out where you are. You use a meditation using the CE-5 app, usually. And so the CE-5 app, as I said, it's 20 or so, 30 minutes. He's got a couple of them on there, but he talks like this, and it is very difficult not to go to sleep. And he talks about the universe and seeing everything as an apple and doing all that sort of thing. And you basically, your thought waves go into theta. Usually you would expect it to go into theta waves, which is the mind state of meditation. And so we go into that theta form. And I think, as I've talked about many times, it's an accessible conscious realm. It's beta is the state that we're always in. This is the thinking state. Alpha is the state when you close your eyes and you're just sort of, daydreaming, but maybe about to go to sleep. And delta's in when you're in deep sleep. So this theta is sort of a mixture of the waves, and it allows you or enables you to have a level of consciousness. They're always talking about altering your thought forms and your consciousness. It allows you to access these other realms. Within other dimensions, they use the band lots of terms: holographic universe, you can parallel dimensions, you can call it whatever you want, but it's considered to be coherent thought sequencing. Now, of course, you don't need this app. Other things that they say that you should use, you can use a magnetometer, so you can see how it affects the magnetism at the moment. And of course, the magnetism is going crazy this year. I don't know if anybody knows, but it's shifted by about 6 degrees, which it normally does over 20 years. It's accelerated over the last 10 years to an incredible speed. They're not mentioning that, of course. We're all being locked inside. We don't know anything that's happening out there. So, it's a perfect time to make contact. And then he's released this this movie, which I couldn't get to download. I tried so many different forms. I hope people out there have managed to do it. That will send you straight into another form of meditative form, because every one of his documentaries have been really boring and promised lots and delivered very little. Yeah, so he considers it to be the science of consciousness. So you've got these different levels of consciousness, and that's basically what you're doing. And you're hoping to have something to happen instantaneously. That's the thing. There's no point in sending something out there and then it happening 100 years from now or whatever. It has to happen instantaneously. So they have to be aware of the time sequence that we're in. Now, the reasoning they give behind, and if you have a look on the pages on the Sirius site, there's very few photographs and the videos are terrible. I mean, it's really appalling, the evidence that they use, I find, compared to what other people have collected. And they tried to collect evidence, and I contacted them about sending in my audio evidence for the movie. And at first they said they weren't interested. And that's because most of the movies are, all of them are focused on the people that they've employed to pass on, disseminate the information that they want in the form that they want. And so, you know, but then they got back to me and said they were interested. A couple of weeks later, obviously they didn't have enough evidence, but I didn't send it in the end. I just thought, oh, I don't really want to contribute to this because I do have my queries about what their intentions are, because you have to think about intention. Why are we calling aliens in? What purpose? Let's just imagine that these are from Beta Alpha Centauri, yeah, and we're calling them in. For what purpose? Now, are we asking them to heal the earth? Are we asking them to cohabit, to take over? Or are you just calling them in for a cup of tea? We have to understand what the purpose of us doing it is. And when you're doing this thing, you have to think about it in reality. If it's not just lights in the sky, you know, I mean, when I called them in, I got them to heal me. There was a specific purpose there, and they did what they did. Whether they actually did it or not, you don't know, but I was healed. So you've got to consider it. You really have to think and focus on what your intention is and what you want their intention to be. So I'm concerned.
Yeah, well, I've sort of said to people over the years, you know, people say if a UFO landed, would you get in? And I'd say, no. If a stranger's car pulls up, do you get in? You know, so I sort of feel along the same lines that
see, I'd get in. Unless they were really hideously looking, I'd get in. I would, you know, and I suspect I've been on these things. I've done past life. I've done regression for when I was taken. And the funny thing is that I think I've said before, when they arrived and they thought I would be scared, and they're like, oh, don't worry, don't. I'm like, yes, this is happening. Check the time, check everything. This is happening. I'm going to be taken. You know, and I was really excited. I didn't hide under a bed or go, oh, not me, not me. So you don't know how you're going to react. If they looked really nice, maybe if they come in the form, you know, like spirits are known to come in the form of a young child or as a past grandparent or something. Now, you don't know if these are really people who've passed gone, or if these are entities, whether they're extraterrestrial or whatever, that are, you know, reading your waveforms, and they can see what it is in your memory, and they're just mimicking what you've got in your memory to encourage you and invite you to join them. You don't know.
Well, that's a possibility, and I think it sort of touches on one of the areas that I have an interest in, which is the connection with the UFO subject and the afterlife. And it's curious that Stephen Greer's experiences, like the origins of the CE-5 protocols, emerged when he actually had a near-death experience at age 17. And he describes entering a profound state of cosmic consciousness and experiencing a profound state of oneness, which is a very common thing for people to report who've had near-death experiences. They have this real feeling of connection to everything. And when that was happening, he describes himself as becoming a point of light, and he saw two other beings who were also points of light. And during the near-death experience, they said, you may come with us or go back to Earth. And that's really common in near-death experiences, to have this point where you can make a decision, or the decision's made for you. You know, no, you're going back. But he asked, well, what should I do? And they replied, well, we prefer you go back to Earth.
Would you want to be in eternity with him? Go back.
We don't want you. So he agreed. And the next thing you know, well, a little bit of chewing and frying, but he eventually got back into his body. And from that experience, he was spontaneously healed from what was going on. I think he had some sort of blood poisoning or something like that, because he had an injury on his leg that he had treated. But then later, in 1973, he saw a shape which looked like the ship he'd seen when he was about 8 or 9. So he'd had a history of these, of seeing these things. And he said a voice external to himself said, "Behold, what a beautiful universe God has made." And he immediately entered the same state of consciousness as when he had his near-death experience, and he saw an alien in the distance. And the next thing, it came up to him, touched him, his hair stood on end.
Where did it touch him?
Sorry, hang on, my battery's running low, hold on.
Oh. Touched him on his shoulder, I think.
Oh, there we go. Wasn't plugged in properly. I don't know why that happened, but there you go. So anyway, so the alien came up to him, touched him, and the next thing, they were on board a craft in an instant, and he and the alien seemed to dematerialize, then appear in outer space. And he found himself sitting with two extraterrestrial beings, and they were all in a meditative state, which he calls cosmic consciousness. And then he and the ETs created the protocols. Now, he doesn't go into however that occurred, and anyone who wants to know about that experience, a bit more about the experience, he talks about it. If you look up Stephen Greer's NDE on YouTube, you'll find him talking about it. Just goes for a few minutes. But after that, he began practicing seeing these ETs in his mind's eye, and then what he called the vectoring them in through his, like you were saying before, with the mind to a location, and to have an encounter. And then these beings told him at some point, it's going to be very important that you're teaching people, you know, how to do this. Now, the whole thing around that is that it occurred during a near-death experience. And anyone who's studied NDEs, and I have quite in-depthly, or had one themselves, which I also have had, knows that they can't be taught or reproduced because they occur spontaneously, and no one really knows why they happen, okay? And secondly, the experiences are relevant to the individual who had the experience at the time. And thirdly, only a small percentage of people are predisposed to having these types of experiences, which really fall under the greater umbrella of mystical experiences, which, you know, again, I guess you can look at all the different types of mystical experiences in history that people have reported and go, well, were there extraterrestrials involved? We've just today, I think it was, put up, Barry's just put up the recording of Claire Williams talking about the Fatima incident and questioning, you know, are Marian apparitions just misinterpreted close encounters, right? So I sort of challenge any reasoning behind using the CE-5 protocols at all to attract aliens. What are your thoughts on that, Gem?
Well, I obviously think it's okay because I've been doing it.
Yeah, but do you think it's necessary?
I don't, but again, with for some people, you do need to, a lot of people don't meditate or whatever, and they haven't had this, what they call an awakening. And so it's a great way for people to tailor their mind. It's what they call it, a contact trilogy is what he uses. And he uses the number 3 a lot in many of his things. It's in the symbol of C Ceti. Because 3 obviously has the magical significance as well. Anybody who follows the Kabbalah understands the significance of the Trinity, and it's used in religion, etc. And it's the attainment of reaching Ein Sof, or this oneness with God. And you can call it God, you can call it aliens, you can phrase whatever you're doing. You know, obviously, a lot of people would say that they can be contacting angels. You know, we have nuns, etc., who have regular contacts through prayer. Now, prayer, of course, is one of those forms that they use. He's got 3 different forms. So he uses light, so lasers. He uses sound, which is the audio tones. Oh, thanks, cat. My cat's just destroying the thing. Audio tones that are used, and also that should lead to coherent thought sequencing. So this is, it is a group mind. So if you've got a group, a nunnery or whoever, a collective group with the common goal of drawing in the aliens, seeing an angel, you know, even healings, whatever, then there is a tangibility in that you can do it, and it's considered a miracle. It's considered miraculous. Now, we wouldn't consider calling in aliens and seeing lights flashing, and I certainly don't, as miraculous. It's something that's happened many times for me and for other people as well. So we have to think about what it is, how we're perceiving it, and what it is, as I say, this creation of the egregore. In magic, it's the same thing. So anybody who is following a spiritual, magical life, they are using a way of processing their mind, body, and spirit in harmony to focus on the goal of oneness. The powers that be have obviously got rid of Sheryl for the moment. As I say, I've got my special G5 system here. This is Gem 6. And so this is helping me go. We were talking about consciousness and how to contact them. And I was saying that it's coherent thought sequencing that they're using as a process of talking to, whether it's aliens, UFOs, whatever. A lot of people have descriptions of, I'll take this off, it's quite hot, descriptions of their experiments where they've just gone outside and they've thought about seeing a UFO and they've actually seen one. So it could just be as simple as that. Whereas a lot of people will say, I've never seen a ghost, I've never seen a UFO, I'm never going to. And of course, then they probably aren't, because they're not aware enough. My cat's just barking over everything. They're not aware enough of what they're doing. So I don't know if I'm talking to myself or not, but one of the systems that's already in place, we're talking about CE-5, of course, is SETI. Now, SETI was started in the 1960s, I think it was 1960, by Drake. And he was actually doing a special project called Project Ozma. Now, it was based on Frank Baum's Queen of Oz. And so that was from the Green Bank radio telescope. And he wanted to look into his idea was to look into the sky using a radio telescope and see if he could make contact with any aliens. Now, he was looking in the Tau Ceti region, and I think it was Epsilon, oh, I can't find it, Epsilon somewhere, and didn't obviously get anything there. They've redeveloped SETI now. Now, it was started by NASA in 1985. It went live, I think, February 1st, if I remember correctly. And so they went and they were doing, started actually consciously contacting aliens, or looking for aliens through radio signals. Now, of course, if you think about it, radio signals are such a limited band that for contact, and if we're talking about these beings which are far superior to us, which should have to be able to make contact with us, they'd have to be technologically more superior than where we are. We've had so many different civilizations, but we have to think about what it is that what level they would actually be at. We couldn't even comprehend if you just think about the last 20 years and the technology developed through Wi-Fi, etc. But now in 2020, they have what's called breakthrough listen. So this is a new development that they've got where they're using the VLA, the vast array of, it's called a very large array. They come up with really good acronyms. And it's 27 antennas at Green Bank, and they're using those to look at a broader range. So it's not just radio waves, they're looking at infrared, ultraviolet, through a lot of the electromagnetic spectrum now. And so these radio telescopes are actually there anyway, and they're already scanning the sky, but they've developed a program where they're collecting all that data that's already coming in and using that to analyze as part of SETI. So hopefully, now that they're looking in a broader range, and they're also looking at, they've decided that they were going to look into the center of the Milky Way, because obviously you're more likely, if you were an intelligent life form who was trying to send a communication out across the Milky Way, where would you send it from? Obviously, either the inside out or from the outside in. So they're doing that. Now, Sheryl's back. Hello. I've been talking to myself for the last 20 minutes. Or have I been live on Facebook? I have no idea.
I'm back.
Has anybody been listening to me? I'm talking about SETI and their new developments in 2020 and how it's developed to look at a broader range. And it's called the Schelling Point idea. That's it. That if you want to have a communication beacon, you would have it in the center of the galaxy so that people could communicate. So that's a new development just this year. And so they're getting masses of amounts of data, and they're sending them out to people's phones, and you know, you can allow your computers to process the data overnight, etc. And I used to do that a lot before there was lots of things like viruses, etc. But you know, hopefully it's cleared. But so it's possible now that they're looking in this much broader range that we could actually pick something up. So it's a form of CE-5, SETI, is because we are initiating contact. We're trying to get them to contact back in whichever form that they already have. But of course, we're talking about light years, and the ideology behind the fact that they can come from massive distances is that they travel faster than the speed of light. And going back to Stephen Greer, he's been talking to Russell Targ, which he also does in the movie as well, who's one of the most famous remote viewers. And so he's been discussing it with him, and how that they go beyond the light. So it's this beyond the curtain of light, and they can, that's what they do. So time and space have no real meaning. You can target where it is. And so that's how they're supposedly coming in. Why we need a laser pointer to point and say we're here, I have no idea. It sounds very basic to me. I think more likely than picking up on the thought waves than anything, but give somebody something fancy to wave. And I do like my laser pointer. They're pretty cool things to have. So I'd recommend, so long as you, I mean, again, you've got to be really careful, especially with all the things going on at the moment with planes. Well, I suppose there's fewer planes now, so it's a good time to do it. Sticking them up with
Sorry, I'm just going to have to jump in here. I don't know what you've been talking about except for SETI. But I was just going to look at some of the comments that have been coming through. Deborah said a while back, what do they have to offer us? I mean, I think she means ETs, of course. What do they, is that what you mean, Deb? I think so. What do they have to offer us?
Well, everybody's hoping enlightenment, technology, the chance of peace, maybe the chance of all these technologies to be able to travel elsewhere. Spiritually, you know, that's the big question I think most people want answering. What's life after death? What's life? Those sorts of things. I think we're hoping that such a technologically advanced being, because we always imagine them as being so nice and benevolent and la la la, but obviously there's the reptilians and all those around, of which Greer is definitely one of them. And of course, according to David Icke, so is the Queen and the whole royal family and the whole members of the Bilderberg. And yeah, we don't need to get into that, but you know, you just don't know.
No. Another comment is from Mary Lou. I imagine their perspective is different. I'd like to know what they feel and think of us and how we could improve ourselves. Thoughts?
I think that we're absolutely appalling. I hate us as a race. I think we're terrible. We're awful parasites upon the earth who destroy it. We're saprophytic, everything about us is terrible. And it's just showing that the nature's healing itself at the moment when we're all inside around the world. You know, nature's starting to heal, the environment's starting to heal, etc. If we could come up with some solutions for those sorts of things from alien sources. Why we should need aliens to help us, I don't know, because we know the answers, we know what we have to do. It's just that the governments aren't going to let us do it, and the big companies.
Yeah, some people have said to me over the years that not much has changed in the UFO field over the decades, but I see it a bit differently. By the mid-1950s, there were over 150 contactee-oriented groups just in America alone, and I know UFO Research Queensland is the second oldest continually running group in the world, and certainly the longest running group in Australia. And for a long time, the subject of the occupants of UFOs was largely avoided by ufologists. And this was, and pardon me for using that word, but it's just easier. And this was still so when I joined UFO Research Queensland in 1988, that at the meetings that I was going to, the focus was still on the craft. And it's not to say you can't learn something about the technology or about the civilization through their technology by observing that, but you know, that I kept thinking, why are they talking about the people driving those things, or, you know, moving those things, or even if those things are even living beings, for example, right? But in the 1990s, when Stephen Greer's CE group, and I guess many offshoots, I think there are quite a few groups that established around that, it made its impact in the field by shifting the attention away from seeing UFOs to wanting to make contact with their occupants. And I think particularly of interest about that is that this occurred smack bang in the middle of the alien abduction decade of the 1990s. So in a way, CE was carving out its own shift. It was adding to that shift in perspective away from just looking at the craft and starting to look at the occupants, where today we've got groups forming all around the planet of groups of people who want to go out and make contact. And I think in that respect that we must be able to recognise that there has been some sort of evolution in the field, surely.
Well, you have to think, I mean, the shape of the craft was really important, wasn't it? And we've got to think about the military and how many different crafts they had around. The stealth bomber, etc., was commonly seen and cited as being a UFO. And so by focusing on the shape of the craft, then they, you know, could be easily linked to the military. And I think that was part of them just focusing on the craft and not letting people think about what's actually going on inside. I think, you know, because their technologies are, if you think about how old the technology is now, that they've had for around since in the military, the 1950s and 60s, it's appalling. There's no way that they're still using the same old Hercules bombers, and you know, when you think about it, it doesn't make sense. So they have all these craft which they tested, Groom Lake, etc. And by focusing on the craft, then you're just focusing on the craft and you're not focusing on the fact that there's really aliens coming in or whatever, unless you make people loonies. You know, you have to make out that everyone who sees a UFO is loony, which is pretty obvious, obviously.
Yeah.
I mean, this is created by them. Where this, you know, remember that they vilified and demonized people who have had sightings or anything out of the ordinary, whether it's seeing ghosts or having any out of the ordinary consciousness experiences, because they want us here in this place, which is not reality. It's a very limited band of reality.
Just going to go to some of the questions in the feed here. Whoops, where'd they go? Whoops, come back. There we go.
Wherever you went.
No, I disappeared into. I disappeared. Yeah. So Daniel's saying, do you think that aliens might? Oh gosh, it's fading. Whoops, come back.
Reality is changing.
Yeah, it might have anything to do with COVID-19. If they do care about our environment, might they have contributed to this massive change in our society?
Well, I mean, it depends on how you want to see it. We think that panspermia is likely how we were seeded, and there's definitely lots of viruses, etc., that come in through meteors. There's been links with that. Now, there was a meteor that came in over Wuhan at the time. And so viruses can be shed, and you know, they say there's no life out there, evidence of life out there at all, but absolutely there's no question about there being life. It's just how do we want to define it? If you're talking about intelligent life forces, then I can come out with tons of conspiracies, but of course this isn't the place to do that, and you have to question what would be the motivation for aliens. I mean, as I say, if you look at David Icke, he says that this is part of the reptilian agenda, the New World Order programming, and you can go with lots of different people, and you have to decide for yourself what it actually is with COVID-19. It's not, let's just say it's definitely not what they say it is. Anyone who knows anything about biology understands that definitely, but this is obviously not the forum for any of that sort of stuff, but yeah, we could it's just as likely as anything else at the moment.
I've got there's a question from Mike. He's saying, can you talk about the role of UFO groups and researchers during this lockdown, and if governments impose restrictions on the internet, how will UFO believers communicate and be able to offer a different narrative that is based on love, not fear? Very good question, Mike. I've been asking myself those same things. But you go ahead, Gem.
Well, I think telepathy has a lot to go with. I use telepathy, and I actually have an experience where yesterday I made contact with my father and actually appeared in his dreams. I was concerned about him for some reason and made contact with him in his dreams, called him up, and he said that he was sitting watching a lecture by me saying, talking about when you wake up, do you have about a paranormal experience on waking? And that was the minute that I actually called him on his home phone, and it woke him up. So telepathy is real, and if you watch any of people like Russell Targ, etc., you can see how to do it. Everybody can do it. So that's the new way of communication. I think that's, again, part of the group mind. People who have had experiences with UFOs have that different level of consciousness. You can attune your brainwaves and your thinking patterns to be able to be a receiver or a sender. And everyone can do it. Everyone has the ability. They just try and tell us that we can't. The question is, what is your motivation to do that, and what is your goal in doing that? But yeah, I reckon that we should all do that. To go back, we did an experiment with a few of our, some people will know about this, but we did a CE-5 experiment with some of our members of UFO committee, where it was a secret one. We didn't let you in on it because we just wanted to keep it a small group. There's 4 of us, and we decided between us that we were going to, when we were going to St. Helena Island, we were going to manifest a UFO. So a week before, we decided we would all meditate at the same time every night, and we would see a UFO, and the UFO would be a bright white light that fell down slowly from the skies. This is what we had agreed on. We got there, we got on the island. I'd actually forgotten about it. We were walking along. We hadn't even started the actual sky viewing bit because it was part paranormal, part sky viewing. And the 4 of us, we weren't even walking together, but we all experienced it along with other people, the exact thing. This bright light appeared in the sky and it fell slowly. And it was enormous, enormous thing. It definitely wasn't, you know, a shooting star or whatever. And so I think that we can do that. It's a great experiment to do. And I think we should instigate something like that as part of the UFO community. Maybe as UFORQ, we should agree to have a meditation. Maybe not invite little green men in, but we could do a test where we all, because we're all not very busy at the moment, we all focus on a specific time and we're going to manifest in a specific location. Now we should choose somewhere that might be televised, or it might be somewhere where there's a webcam so we can all watch it, like over Loch Ness where they have a permanent webcam or something like that. And you have to specify the time as well, time and location. I think it's a great thing we could do, and see if anybody's interested in doing that. I've done lots of things with consciousness test, doing dream experiments with listeners in my radio show and all sorts, and they all seem to work. So we can do it. So I don't know what you think about that.
Well, I want to go back to the first part of that question, which is skipped. What's the role of UFO groups and UFO researchers in the lockdown? And I think to answer Mike's question, it is to try and keep doing what we've been doing and look for alternate ways to do it. And I think probably in a weird way, it's become an opportunity to strengthen connections, because now more than ever, you know, people are turning to the internet. And let's just put aside the question of, you know, if it gets switched off, what the hell do we do? But people are connecting a lot more. I've spent hours and hours and hours in the last 4 weeks, you know, on Zooms with people, which I hadn't done before. I've done a few.
Chinese are listening in.
Yeah, so you know, it's a great opportunity for people to connect nationally and internationally and exchange information more readily. Although we're living in the information overload age, but you know, we're still getting some reports in, and we've still had some a couple of close encounter reports just recently that we're following up. And I think just keep getting the information out as much as the information's coming in. We've got even more. We've awakened in our mind of other ways to get the information out, and it's a great opportunity to educate the public even more. I think that's how I would answer that first part of your question, Mike. He also asked, where are we? And he also asked, will the lockdown provide an opportunity for governments to disclose UFOs as a threat deserving, keeps fading, a military response, and how will UFO groups oppose that false narrative? Holy moly, Mike.
False flag event, it's been predicted along with all of this. I mean, this stuff's been predicted for many, many years to happen as a form of control. They manufactured the war on terror and many wars from manufactured information. This is just another way of, regardless of whether COVID-19 is real or not, that's not really the question here, is how we're going to give up our rights. And there's going to be an introduction of a vaccination, and that means that we're going to have to all be infected with the vaccine. Whatever's in that vaccine, we can never know. And that will be the right for us to be able to travel. I think that's the way that things are going to go. Now, of course, the vaccine may be just a vaccine, but why you would vaccinate against something that hasn't really killed that many people, as opposed to measles, tuberculosis, etc., etc., etc.
That's right.
I mean, yeah. It doesn't add up. So there's obviously something else to do with our rights and our loss of rights. And of course, we've all given up our rights quite readily by staying inside. And all it needs is a created scenario, whether it's real or not. So I'm not saying it's not real, but it's a scenario that comes up and that's agreed upon by all of the countries. And that scenario, we just say, yes, well, we've lost our rights. Now, it's not lawful for us to be penalized for being outside. It's not actually lawful for that, you know, the fines and stuff like that. In a lot of the countries. Now, some of the countries have changed their laws so that it is now against the law for people to be living their lives in a very, and we're talking about physical isolation and physical distancing still, just somebody sitting on a park bench eating some food or having a picnic on their own in, you know, in the wilderness or whatever they're doing. Those sorts of things are now becoming illegal as well. So we've got to think about what it is that we want to do. And there's so many different people who are talking about this, but we do really need to think about who we are in the world, where we want to go, and whether we want to take the more spiritual route or whether we do want to allow ourselves to be treated like children and told how to think, what to think, where to go, who to be, because that's what we've been told all our lives, that there's no such thing as the supernatural, UFOs, alien, whatever it might be. It should be for people to explore themselves.
Liz is asking, what do you think of Dr. Greer's assertion that all negative abduction experiences are government-led? I personally don't think that's true, Liz, but what do you think, Gem?
I think it's a cop-out. It's an easy way of saying that if you use CE-5, you're blessed, you're fine. If you haven't done that, used his protocol, and it's just happened to you, then it's got to be the government. It's a good cop-out, isn't it, to just say that? So
I've never really understood. I know people talk about MILABs, which is military abductions, and I know Helmut Lammer published a book about MILABs, and that got everyone very interested and started saying those sorts of things, that all alien abduction experiences are done by the military. But then, you know, that book came out in the 90s, I think, and then I was on an international email list, which a couple of you may have been around then. And he then withdrew he said he no longer felt that was actually the case. And he withdrew that research that he had done. He just, or you know, his comments in the book, I suppose you'd say, just didn't agree with it anymore. Thoughts?
Yeah. Well, it's very common that people will have one mindset, and then down the line they may have been warned off, or they may have had a personal experience that might have changed their minds. I mean, we don't know, do we? I mean, it's easy to say it's the big bad government, which, you know, I think, again, that's a cop-out. It could be anything, could be changes of experiences, but a lot of people will change their tune over time. He may have had more information, but you know, again, we are being programmed through TV and through especially Hollywood as to how to think, to expect that we need a superhero, we need something to swoop down and save the world because we can't do it for ourselves. The plethora of superhero movies is absolutely ridiculous. So we're being created into this nanny thought form that we need to be, every decision to be made for us, and we can't be independent and we can't help for ourselves. We need the aliens to come down and rescue us, which I don't know if you think's the same, but I'd rather
I don't think that's going to happen. I really just don't. I never have. I think, at least for the ETs that I'd like to communicate with and be a part of their galactic neighbourhood, I don't particularly want anyone to rescue us, because I think that is a cheap way of learning lessons. We can't take shortcuts. We have to get it to become part of that cosmic neighbourhood. And if we don't get it, it's not going to happen. So we may as well figure it out here on planet Earth first before we get out there. My thing is stuck and I can't get the next comments up. But anyway, that's okay. I was going to go back to the MyLabs too. I just could not understand how the military were expected to use all their resources to be doing all those alien abduction experiences that were reported during the 1990s. I just can't see how that could have happened. Didn't make sense to me.
In the 1990s as well. Mine happened in 98, and it was a massive flap of experiences. Of course, that was the time of the X-Files, and lots of people were watching that. And of course, it's all based on the military creating this great, brave new world, etc. So again, you can be programmed into this sort of thinking, and we're very susceptible to, and we don't even notice it. I've noticed there are a lot of things that people are thinking as normal already, and it's only within a couple of months, and you're just thinking, this is not normal, but we're being programmed that it is normal, and that you have to perform in a certain way, and you have to believe certain things, and that's always been the case with humanity. You know, there has to be the minions and those who are more in the know, and it's always a need to know basis, and it goes through the military or any big group. There's always a need to know, and so it depends on what you know, and if you know something, it doesn't mean it's true. That's the problem.
That's right. That's exactly right.
So just because somebody tells you that you're calling in aliens, it doesn't mean you are. It could be demonic, it could be anything, whatever frame you want to call it. You know, as I say, I think the best way is to get through all these situations is to be positive, to know yourself, definitely have trust in yourself, as in making your own decisions, and obviously being for the best for everybody, for the greater good as they consider it. But everybody needs to have an open mind and think about what motivations are behind every decision that's made, which you haven't made for yourself. Because at the moment, nobody's getting to make any decisions for themselves, or very, very few. And yes, if you consider the COVID situation that we're in, Australia's probably done the best in the world, but we've also had the greatest lockdown. Now, is that going to be a model that's now used for the rest of the world going forward? It's possible that it is. And of course, Australia is always the testing ground for everything. So because we're a contained society and we're very easy to test. So we just got to be mindful of all these things that we feed into and call it. I mean, if I could call them in and say, okay, help us, let's have world peace, let's all live in nirvana now, and there'd be no competition and no, you know, we'd be all lovely. I would do it. I would do it. And if we, and you know, maybe, and that's the thing, the Etherian Society, I don't know how many people know about the Etherian Society, but they were created by Dr. George King in the 1950s. Now, he was just a taxi driver, and he used his spiritual perception to have contact with aliens. And now there is a satellite number 3 above at the moment. Now, this is what the Etherian Society say. Satellite number 3 comes around several times a year, and it's there now. And what it is, it's called a spiritual push. So it is a special satellite that was put there by certain alien beings, and you can look it all up on their website. And they have actually got a group here in Brisbane, who are a lovely little group. But what they do is it's focused intention. So by prayer, positive thought, you can heal the world or people or whatever it is that your intention is, and it's passing at the moment. And so they're asking for people to join in, and a lot of people are doing this. I mean, a lot of people have turned to spirituality, and loads of people have downloaded meditation apps and are meditating for the first time as a way of coping with what's happening, etc., etc. So a great positive can come from this, regardless of what the scenario is, who created it, whether it's whatever, it doesn't really matter. It's how we deal with it. So this spirituality. So maybe you could all look at etherius.org and see, as I say, satellite number 3 up above. And there are lots of these different satellite tiny groups that are doing that and putting forward, you know, I assume all the religious groups, hopefully, are being positive and sending out positive thoughts and positive waves, positive mantras to help humanity, if we should really be helped. I mean, often you think, do we deserve it, the way we treat each other and the world? Do we deserve to have this earth? I don't know. Maybe we should create a bee arc and send the ones off like in Hitchhikers.
There's another question. There's another question here. Do we know why they want to connect with us for help or support or benevolent? I think it's help question, support question, benevolent. You know, I think basically why are ETs here? I think there's a variety of reasons. They're here for scientific purposes, for research. They're here for, some of them are for their own agenda that are involved in the alien abduction experiences. And I, you know, the interesting thing about those is that all around the planet during the 1990s, those reports were, those experiences were reported to UFO groups, independent UFO researchers, all around the planet for 10 long years. We can never forget that. I lived through that. I took a lot of those calls for UFO Research Queensland. I spoke to a lot of people who'd had close encounters, who were traumatised, who had tears on the other end of the phone, and that affected me deeply. And so I was probably, you know, I was one of those people in our organisation that had that experience of talking to those people. And when other people, you know, suggest, like Stephen Greer, that all ETs are benevolent, it really riles me, because I spoke to those people. I know what they were telling me, what they were, their emotions were, their emotional state. So I certainly think that some of these ETs, whether they're still here or not now, they had their own agenda, and it wasn't good for humanity at that time. What's going on now, it's not as clear, because the people who are coming forward now with close encounters are people who had them years ago. Although there was one person recently who was having she'd had a lot of experiences when she was a child, but was now reporting markings on the ground on the property and waking up with nosebleeds, things like that. So there could still be some of that going on. The hybrid breeding program, but I don't think all of them are here. I think they're just here for their own purposes, to study the planet. There'll be scientists among them. There'll be researchers. They'll be wanting to, you know, there may just be people coming here, dropping in every 10, 20 years for a certain period of time. You know, just checking in to see what's going on this planet, just purely from a scientific perspective, and don't really care about you know, well, I guess they would if they're scientists, but, you know, humans are part of nature, but just looking at all sorts of different things. And there's been some very interesting stories over the years of people saying they saw aliens bending down and picking up what looked like sticks off the ground, or looking at insects, or, you know, bird life and those sorts of things, studying those things, all sorts of different types of life forms. So, yeah, I think there could be some that are benevolent and some that are scientifically oriented, and some that are not here to help us. They're just coming to take what they want. As far as we know, there could be a cosmic black market out there, and you know, that DNA is being collected from all living things here on the planet, and it's been traded out there in the cosmos, and we wouldn't have a clue about it. Who knows? It could be some of the DNA here could be useful in you know, in creating all sorts of hybrid life forms on other planets to give them life, to put life on those planets. I mean, we don't even really know where life came from on this planet. I certainly don't think that we all trudged out of a slimy pool somewhere.
No, panspermia is probably the most likely. I mean, we have such an anthropocentric view of our importance as humans. I mean, there's so many different species on this earth that are probably much more important biologically, and certainly evolutionary. They're much more successful beings and creatures. And then to have the arrogance to think that all ETs are the same. And if you just look at the amount of species that are on our Earth, and then we're talking about millions of billions and zillions of planets and star systems and, you know, ridiculous amounts of things, the volume of beings that are there that probably aren't carbon-based, you know, a lot of them are considered to be etheric, and they're the ones that have probably had most contact with us over the last 2,000 to 4,000 years, I think, in the spiritual sense that we term as angelic type beings. I think we're so ignorant and so arrogant as people, as this being, as this species, that we're so important, and we're not. I think if they are visiting us, we are, you know, we are on the spiral arm of the galaxy. We're way out. We're just such an insignificant little nobodies of one tiny little galaxy. Yeah. Would you respond to a laser light flashing? Maybe you're that bothered. But I think it's more likely it's something that we're manifesting ourselves, that it's already here. I don't think it's necessarily extraterrestrial.
Mm-hmm. Well, we're going to wind this up by 8:30, so I'm just going to pull out a couple more questions. We've got... What also are your thoughts about John F. Kennedy? Was he assassinated because he was pushing to have disclosure?
Well, that is the major one, and anybody who was asked about it, you know, I remember that a lot of, you want to be the president or prime minister because you want to find out about disclosure. And again, it's a need to know basis. I think the people who are in power are not in power at all. They're the puppets that are operated. And if you do get to find out, I mean, that's what they said with Marilyn Monroe, is that he took her to go and see the UFOs, and bang, she's gone too. So there's so much you could say about it all, and we won't know, but it's very fishy. A lot of it's very fishy, and it definitely could be UFO related. But yeah, it's great to postulate, isn't it?
Keeps the mind busy, occupied, distracted at the moment in the restrictions. And another one here, speaking of abductions and contact, I wonder if this is increasing or decreasing now that everyone is at home. There would be more witnesses to encounters. I've been wondering that myself, actually, if people are having more experiences or not. We're not hearing a lot about them. We certainly aren't hearing the same amount that we used to hear during the 1990s. They trickle in. Certainly we're not getting the sighting reports that we used to, but that was already the trend before this all happened anyway, before the pandemic hit, because, and I think social media has got a lot to do with that, in diffusing reports out there rather than coming to you know, UFO organisations who actually document them, and they go into the records, and people will will talk about, I've seen that people talk about their sightings and experiences on Facebooks, but those Facebook pages don't actually document anything, so they get lost. So it's very difficult to know, but they're certainly not reporting them to us. And I think it's probably the same for the Sydney UFO group and the one in Victoria too. I don't know if any of them are on here.
Well, the strange thing is that fear is an inhibitor of the spirit molecule DMT, the production of it, and it's been strongly linked as being necessary to be a production of DMT, which is endogenous, to be able to have these types of experiences, to have that form of change of consciousness. And so programming us all to live in fear can actually stop us having those types of experiences. Obviously, once you're in that process, a lot of people are terrified, and that might be why they lose sort of conscious links with the alien beings. You know, if something comes into your bedroom, which is the stereotype, and a lot of people, as I mentioned, a lot of people are very terrified. You could have already been in that sleep state where you're producing DMT in REM sleep, and then it can inhibit, obviously you're going to be inhibiting that state by being in fear. And maybe that's why if these are real experiences with aliens, that's why they try and calm you down usually and say, because I mean, that's the telepathy that happened with me straight away, was we're not here to hurt you, we're just here to have contact with you. You know, you're very safe, don't worry type, you know, all these feelings and words that were coming into my head. And I'm like, whoa, no way, this is brilliant. But of course, that's not a normal way to respond. And I'm sure that DMT production was carrying on to have that experience. But then, of course, once you get people up there, maybe, and they're having these invasive experiences, which a lot of people have had, it makes you concerned of what's actually happening, if it is really this spiritual experience or not. Well, it could be a government MyLab. You never know.
With people who've had ongoing encounters, though, like they have lived in, and negative encounters, let's focus on that, they have been in fear a lot. And I actually thought it was the trauma that you know, sort of helped to create that connection, because we know, well, it seems, can't say we know, but it seems that trauma creates a link to the paranormal and to other things. So perhaps it can work in the other way too.
Absolutely, it can. In people, there is excessive production. You know, when you go through the death process, there is a massive amount released. And so that's when you get the tunnel and the light and everything. They're the commonalities, and that they say they're the process of DMT being produced. Obviously, I think there's a fine balance between being happy about an experience and living in absolute terror. There's the big switch, maybe.
Yeah. And Lena is asking, will UFORQ be planning another CE-5 event once the lockdown is over and done with? Well, we hope so, Lena. It just depends when it's over, and it's not over until it's over. So we just have to wait and see.
I think we could do a virtual one, though, like I said, where we agree on a place that has a webcam that's 24 hours, and we agree on a time and you know, everybody, and you have to also agree on what it is that you want to manifest. So do you want little green men running around, or do you want just some flashing lights, or a certain color, or a certain movement? We could agree on all those sorts of things and then meditate on it for a week. I mean, everybody's around. It's a great experiment to try. And as I say, I've done it many times and it's been successful every single time. Now, is that success require a certain number of people? I don't think so. Does it require a certain quality of people? I don't think so. Does it require certain abilities? No, I don't think so. I think it just requires a positivity around the fact that you can do it. And I think it would be a great thing for us to try. It gives people something to do and focus on. All the other crazy stuff that's going on, and our loss of everything, liberties. So I suggest, maybe if you want to see what people can suggest, and it's got those 24-hour cameras, it's a good thing to do.
Yeah. I just wanted to say to people listening that we're planning to start some online Zoom meetings, but these will only be available for members, but they will be free. So if you're already a member, you'll be able to tune in for free. That'll be actually part of your membership. And we're just doing it for members because the Australian UFO community is not small, so we can only get so many people on a Zoom meeting. So we have to limit it to members. But you know, stay tuned to the Facebook page, and we'll let you know more about that. Also, I've been thinking about doing the Great Backyard Skywatch, because most of us have got a yard, and I think it'd be great if one night we could actually all go out to the backyard at particular times for a couple of hours and observe the skies and see what we can see, and then report back and collect all that information together. And I have to say, the skies at night and the day at the moment are so clear. It's amazing. The sky is blue during the day, and at night it's just gorgeous. So
and it's the Lyrids at the moment. I was out the other night watching for the Lyrids. It's just at the end tail of them now, but yeah, it's a great time to start watching. And of course, you got to watch out for Elon Musk's massive chain of satellites. A lot of people around the world have been contacting me and telling me about having seen them and what is it, and you can actually, there's apps that you can actually look up where they are. And so a Star Watch or something, I forgot what it's called now, something, and you can actually follow when they're going over Australia, when you can see them. It's because of course it's global coverage. We'll not get into all that, what their purpose is, but they're low altitude, and there's a big change. So there's going to be a lot of sightings which are linked to that, which obviously are not extraterrestrial or anything there.
Well, we've already had a lot. Have
you? Oh, good.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Especially when they first went up, it was like, whoa, people are just went crazy. But anyway, yeah. So, and it's amazing how something doesn't have to actually be a UFO for people to have a profound shift in their consciousness because they've seen something they've never seen before. It's quite amazing, really. Yeah.
Well, everyone's in strange times, so it's perfect experience to try and manifest things or do things that you wanted to do, going inside of yourself and helping develop yourself in whichever ways, whether it's your psychic abilities or whatever, meditating, etc. Brilliant time to do it.
So everyone, thanks for joining us tonight. We will be back. We'll be doing some more lives, just getting into the swing of it really and figuring out how to do it properly. And
interruptions without them taking you down.
And stay tuned on the page for information about the Zoom meetings and also about Backyard Skywatch. So been great having you all here. Thanks for joining, everyone. I've seen you all there, and it's been great. And thanks, Gem, for joining us too.
Everyone make one. It will help.
I think I'll try that. Actually, you've given me another idea. You've given me another idea that everyone makes one of those and takes a photo of it, wearing it, and they paste it onto the page too.
Oh, that sounds perfect.
Great. All right, everyone. Well, good night. Have a great weekend. And
may the force be with you.
Yes.
I'm sitting in my Millennium Falcon. I better get it going.
Oh, and also, I was just going to say, do you want to tell people about your radio show where they can...
Oh, yes, I do the Witching Hour as Nick's Full Moon on Saturday evenings on 102.1 FM for Triple Z, and it is all about the paranormal, UFOs, etc. I'll talk a little bit about Stephen Greer tomorrow night, but a lot about ghosts and things that have been in the UK. I've just been over in the UK. You can also live stream on 4ZZZ.com.au, or you can on demand as well for free the last 6 shows, so you don't have to listen live because it's on at 10 p.m. till midnight, which is usually too late for most people, although people don't have to do much anymore. So so hopefully some of you can join us.
Great. All right, good night, everyone.
Night. Thank you.
Night.
Thank you.